thanks very much for taking the time for this session. What I'd like to launch into straight away is the heading here, which is what is Internet 2.0 plus? Doug, do you want to kick off?
Well, I was thinking about this earlier today, and it seems to me that Internet 2.0 is probably the wrong term, but I think there's just a very big change in the way business is getting done, and Internet 2.0 has a lot to do with it. I think right now that when I always talk about business models, I talk about what do businesses, how do they behave differently to win markets. But I think what's happening with Internet 2.0 is that the business model is actually has two parts to it. It's the way the businesses are selling to the consumers, but actually the consumers have a lot of control now how they interact with the companies that sell. And places like Facebook give this kind of environment where there's a collaboration between business and consumers, or businesses and micro suppliers. And the businesses don't actually have total control over what that business model can be. And I think this is the key thing for telecommunications companies to realize is how do they get value out of this dynamic relationship between the consumers and suppliers and the telecommunication provider. How do they make value from something that seems quite chaotic?
Yeah, if I may add just a point, I think that a lot of credit goes to companies like Amazon that really enabled consumer today not just to be a buyer, but actually be a supplier as well. I think that the future that we see with the Telco 2.0's definitions in a plus version as well is that you have an open gate to allow that transaction to flow two ways. Up to now, communication suppliers are usually interacting with a consumer on one side, and maybe with the other service providers on the other side. But today, I believe that with evolving on that relationship, we're going to see much more complex and, as Doug said, dynamic relationships in the market.
And specifically, what's that got to do with Vlad? What's that got to do with the telecoms industry? Can you give me some ways that would play out?
Sure.
Yeah, you take it.
Yeah, let me take that. I think a good way to think about it is if you think about collaboration sites like Facebook and MySpace right now, they're actually quite closed gardens. The relationship, basically Facebook owns the relationship between the micro suppliers and the consumers. Telecommunications companies can now they're in a better position in some ways than Facebook to create an environment, collaboration.
So the key element here is that non-existing relationship, which is dynamically opening from time to time and using certain service and closing down again as abruptly as it is open. This is not a typical way how telco operators were doing it. You have a provisioning, and you have activation, you have management of inventory, and so forth. Today's collaboration actually enables you that there is no more barriers there, and I think that Telco 2.0 really is addressing those issues that are very fluid.
How do you guys actually translate this into your technology?
I would say that Metratech has always been very, very strong about modeling or automating business models that are previously unknown. And I think the whole thing about Telco 2.0 is that all the business models are potentially new. And the real trick is how do you create a financial relationship where the consumer, the micro supplier, the telco all come out ahead. And we have always talked about that we have no presuppositions about what the business model should be. Our job is to automate that. And I think that is the key thing that a billing system should do, and I think that's the key value that we bring to the equation.
Okay, now we're talking about future services, so we don't know what all of them are and how to provide for future services. But in terms of your existing clients, what way are you providing for these future services for them? And are there some examples of things that have just come along?
Yeah, I think that really it's important to identify. You're absolutely right. The new services that we don't know how they're going to be, and in a new world, it is not defined by the service provider, traditional service provider, with a telco service provider. It is defined by the services owner. We called it a content owner because in previous lives we figured out how to do the content. We figured out how to do control of the content, deliver that content. But today it's not about the content anymore. The example that springs to my mind is the way how Microsoft handles that with their partners, with the partners that are becoming really carriers of the business services. And that is the Microsoft Online services are federated through the systems and offered by several operators. For example, Telstra in Australia and Vodafone also, that are taking the challenge and bringing in completely different service that is really fundamentally different than typical services that they were providing before. With the change of the fluidity of that service, obviously now we don't know what kind of services are going to be coming through. We don't know what is the nature of those services. We know that there is no CDRs per se. We know that there is no typical OSS and BSS that can actually support these services. And by nature, the service is a value-added service. So the differentiator is the brand that service providers are providing. So both Telstra and Vodafone, and the others that are going to be there. But also they are going to get the value added through that for themselves. So they will have to settle the value chain backwards and collect the money from the customer. But there are many challenges in that process, and right now these are the services that are coming through. And the question is whether those services are going to be the same model tomorrow. I doubt. There are going to be completely different services in the future.
And I'd add to that the cloud is also the potential area where people are creating new applications, and one of the jobs I think Microsoft sees in the future is that it'll be able to let people sell applications on the cloud and help them get money for that. So they're basically, in some ways, they are putting the cloud is a telco 2.0 infrastructure. It is the structure in which people can create these unusual commercial relationships. Some of them these macro relationships through the telco providers, but at the same time sometimes just basically people reselling service. So I think the current generation of systems, I think the CRM and billing systems that the telecommunication provider has do not address the dynamism of the relationships that they need to support. You have to think as a telco as the supporting infrastructure for these Web 2.0 relationships. Now the billing on the one hand, it doesn't understand the fact that they are now the supplier and the consumer, and that may have a direct relationship where the telco is actually acting as a manager of the business relationship. It doesn't know how to deal with these three different points.
And if I may just add, I think that the critical aspect of that whole gamut of the OSS and BSS really is also breaking on a product catalog. In many systems, you need really the service providers were needing to control and own the product catalog. Here, you're going to have a pass-through of the product structures that are completely unnatural for the current telco service providers.
Okay, well, that's a very clear answer. Thanks very much for the invitation to your Boston headquarters and for the time today.
Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.